Good evening, everyone. Call this meeting to order, the August 24th meeting of the Worthington Board of Education. Mr. Cusick, would you please call the roll?
Mrs. Costa Flowers.
Present.
Mrs. Davis.
Present.
Mrs. Epley Skinner.
Present.
Ms. Harless.
Present.
Mrs. Hudson.
Present.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Ian Epley Skinner. I am president this year of the Worthington Board of Education. I'm going to introduce my colleagues here with us this evening. We have Nikki Hudson, board member, Kelly Davis, board member, treasurer TJ Cusick, superintendent Dr. Trent Bowers, Worthington vice president Stephanie Harless, and board member Sheena Costa Flowers. If you're able, please stand and say the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, first item on the agenda tonight is approving the agenda. Could I get a motion to approve?
So moved. Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion, any additions? Hearing none. Mr. Cusick, would you please call the roll?
Mrs. Costa Flowers.
Yes.
Mrs. Davis.
Yes.
Mrs. Epley Skinner.
Yes.
Ms. Harless.
Yes.
Mrs. Hudson.
Yes.
Motion carries. That leads us to the visitor comments section. It doesn't appear that we have any visitors here tonight to have any comments. So that leads us to C1 on the agenda.
Right here you see that the reason we're here in August is directly linked to what the legislature gave power to the County Budget Commission to roll back levies. So they now, the three-member commission has the authority to reduce taxing jurisdiction, including schools, levy, even voter-approved levies. And so in order to do that, they moved the forecast to August so they have time to process that and set rates. I do not foresee that happening to us right now, but it is going on in many parts of Ohio. So make no mistake about it, these two are definitely linked on why we sit here in August. But we're going to continue to use this as a long-range planning tool. Big picture here, you know, our revenues, 81% are local, and close to 78% is property taxes. So we're a locally funded school district, heavily reliant on property taxes. And on the expense side, we're in the people business, we're in the kid business. Again, 3/4 of our expenses are salary and benefits of staff. So since this is the first rollout of the forecast, I'm going to take a couple minutes to go through each one of these lines, explain them. What you're going to see on these charts is the blue line represents the forecast from February, the red line is the revised, so you can see the difference there. The big takeaway on local property taxes, you'll see us plateauing. This is, 2026 is the final increment of our incremental levy. So after, as we move into calendar year 2027, revenues are flat. You do see a little bit of growth there in 28 because Franklin County is set for their triennial update. Again, as a reminder, property values go up, school districts don't get substantially more revenue, the effective rate gets rolled back. So that's why you see those revenues flat. Now, this came up the other day again. It depends on how your property goes compared to the average. So some properties will have a tax increase, but if they do, another property will have a corresponding decrease. The school district doesn't get substantial revenue from when they do reappraisal. That will happen in Franklin County next year. So you see that plateau at the end of our last increment. State funding. So there's two buckets, unrestricted and restricted. The only difference there is the state makes us account for a couple of different categoricals separately. That's the only, but together they make up state funding. You see a drop from the last biennium, so we lost over $1 million in this biennium. We talked about that in length last year, and that's because they didn't increase the inputs. But you do see this bump for this year because we are getting the one-time enrollment growth supplement. As we move to all-day kindergarten, that increased our what they call our average daily membership enough so that we are getting that bump this year, but that's a one-time bump. Again, we expect, that's not included in the formula, and so what we're expecting is flat revenues here on out. We're hopeful in the next biennium, every month goes by, I read the state budget report that their revenue exceeds estimates, and And so we're hopeful that next biennium we get some of that increase. That would be a positive to this forecast, but we can't assume that. I certainly wouldn't have assumed we got a reduction this year, but it happened. We've talked a lot about the state share funding. There was an article, I think it was actually a piece on NBC this past week that talked about this as the lowest level of state funding that Ohio has seen in, I think, over 20 years. You can see that blue graph is the state share, the average state share, which usually is in the 40s, right? So, the funding in Ohio, school funding in Ohio is a partnership between the local and the state, so it's based on property wealth. You would think the average school would then get around 50% state funding, and that historically has been the case. But because they didn't increase those inputs, it's dropped down in the 30s. Worthington, in particular, we are right at 10% minimum funding floor. And so we're back on the guarantee. They try to move away from guarantees. Worthington is back on the guarantee. You can see the effect of the formula on the chart down below, where in 22 they increased the input, so our state share went up, and then as property values increased, our state share went down. When in 24 they adjusted the input, so we got more money, and then you see in 26 and 27 the base cost stayed the same, but the capacity went up because that's our property values, and so we're getting less than $900 a student now. It kicks us back on the guarantee. What we hear from the State House, and I think it's important that we shine a light on this, we hear all the time our legislators say we've given record amounts of money to school funding this past biennium. And if you look at the bottom of this chart, in absolute terms, that's true. State share went from total state funding went from 11.4 billion to 11.7 billion last year, and it's going up to 12 billion this year. So that is a 2.9% increase. But when you pull back the curtain, you see that traditional school districts only got a 1.5% increase last year, a 1.4% increase last year, and predominantly that money went to scholarships, a 9.2% increase. Inflation is a real thing, and when inflation is running at 3 or 4%, and we're only getting 1.5% increase from the state, we have to make that up with local property taxes. There's no way around that. So as we hear stories like Ohio is giving record amounts of funding to education, we have to make sure people understand the details behind that. It's not going to traditional public schools. The state share of local property taxes, this is a flat line. This represents the homestead and rollback provisions. Those were eliminated in levies in 2013, so this is just historical. As those, for any levy prior to 2013, the state still picks up the tab on the 10%. It gives the credit. If they do certain circuit type breakers in the future, this is where this line would change. If property tax would go down, this line would go up. That's what we advocated for, some targeted relief to those who need it. But that's why this line is pretty much flat. Other revenues, this is primarily investment income, so 5.5 of the 6.7 million next year is investment income. Everybody projects rates to go down. They've been slow to do so. They kind of bumped back up. So in this revision, I've increased them slightly, or I've increased projected income in the next 2 years, but I still think rates are going to eventually come back down, especially with the changeover of the Fed. I think there'll be political pressure there to reduce rates, even if it's not warranted. So, but we do get a little bump for this year and next year. On the expense side, so this is a little bit confusing. If you see in this red line, there's really no changes from the prior forecast. We reduced salaries and benefits about 1% because we had 21 retirements, but we also had about 25 teachers leave in the middle of their career, and so they were replaced with entry-level teachers that did save us a little bit of money, so I reduced those wages. Tiana Miller and her staff does an excellent job of finding high-quality entry-level teachers, so we experienced some savings there. But what happened on this chart here is, we go back to the end of 25, we paid teachers their wages in June that they normally would have been paid in July and August. So that had the effect of bumping up salaries and then bumping them down in 26, and now they're back on that trend line. So I put on that chart a trend line of a little under 4.5%. We have that wave, but it was just a timing thing. And the same is true if we go to benefits, because they're a percentage of wages for the most part, and so we had that increase and decrease. I will say insurance is under a lot of pressure. We'll talk about this as we set insurance rates, hopefully at the next board meeting. We project 8% increases in here. The trend now, and the national average is about 10%. So we're having a lot of pressure on insurance costs. Every employer is, we're no different in that regard. And so we're doing everything we can to kind of hold the line. That is a rapidly growing expense on every employer. Services, supply, capital, and other. So these are the four buckets that a lot of people refer to as discretionary. So this is, purchase service has grown lately, and this is why I kind of gave this chart below on what makes up that 25 million. Consulting, the bulk of that is our mental health team, our social workers hired from the ESC. They're not employees, so they're considered a purchase service from the ESC. They're employees of the ESC. Same with our substitutes, that 3.4 million, those are through the ESC, so those fall under this category. Utilities, really not discretionary. And tuition to other entities, that's predominantly the Delaware Career Center and our folks who we have about, I think, around 60 or 70 students that are placed in private settings for specialized services. That has grown a lot in the past. The number of students hasn't grown, but the cost that these entities are charging us has grown. So that is a rapidly growing area as well. You don't see a lot of capital outlay. So we transferred $48 million last year into a capital reserve fund. We also transferred those expenses. So all of our student Chromebooks, about $2 million a year of capital is being used by that 48 million. And then other objects, I think a little over 2 of the 2.7 million is fees we pay Franklin County Auditor for collecting taxes on our behalf. We don't actually have a collections department. So that is what we call our other areas, our discretionary areas, but there's not a lot of discretion there. What does all this mean? So long term, I want to point out a couple things. So this is the chart over 10 years. We assume no levies. You're not allowed to in a 5-year forecast. And you see our revenues flat. So our expenses are growing at about 4 to 5% a year. So this year is the last year we expect to have positive collections. And then next year we start to deficit spend. So 8.3 million. And then from that, it goes about 9 million a year. It's about 2.25, 2.5 mils a year we're growing in expenses. And that grows to 19 to 27. On a cash basis, we're okay. So you see cash, you see the unreserved balance not dip below our targeted reserve until fiscal year 31. So in theory, we could stay off the ballot until November of 30. However, at that point, we're spending $36.9 million more than we're taking in. And the following year, it's 45 million. You would have to make that up in a levy. It would be probably 12, 13, 14 mils at that point. And so that's why we back it up. So remember, November of 28 would be FY 29. And so we're trying to get ahead of not hitting 31's reserve balance being under our targeted area. So this next chart shows that if we stayed on our path of incremental levies every 4 years, that we would be short 83.8 million. But remember, we transferred over 48 million. So at that point, if we take away 2 million a year, we'd still have probably 30-some million to transfer over. And then we're going to do everything we can to hold the line on expenses if we finish 1% or 2% under every year, and that could make up the difference. And we would, this path, the point of this chart is this path shows it's a sustainable model under the current scenario, an incremental approach. There's a lot of risks in here. Again, I talked about insurance, it's 10+% now. Our union agreements protect us in that regard, but our people feel that, so that's going to be a challenge for us. I don't think we're out of the woods yet on property tax changes. I think the legislature has hinted about some things, and the folks that are trying to abolish them through an amendment, they still feel like they're going to come back next fall. Next state budget, and the governor, some of the candidates for governor continue to want to remove the income tax. If you remove the income tax, that's a big source of revenue for the state, and ultimately would hurt the school funding formula. In this forecast, we have very little growth for staff. That matches our projected enrollment growth, so that's okay. But that should change. Then you've heard me talk about STRS continues to advocate for increasing the percentage of contributions. So 1% is about $1 million a year. So they've come out and want to raise it 4%. So that's not in this forecast. And then I always indicate that artificial intelligence is a big unknown for most entities. I think, not speaking on the academic side, we're doing a good job there. On the operational side, there's no doubt that at some point we're going to be impacted here, and how we do that is unknown. So that's the risks and uncertainties in this, and with that, I'm happy to answer any questions. My main message is we are where we thought we'd be.
Thank you, TJ. Those questions?
We saw that last week at finance.
Okay. Nikki?
Yeah, I attended the TAC meeting earlier last week, so didn't go through the forecast in great detail, but definitely went through the highlights of it and understanding of that we are where we thought would be. Appreciate the detail. TJ also appreciate putting out to the community what we discussed at TAC, which was that there are a number of ways that neighborhood communities are approaching funding school these days, right? So some are looking at a combination of income and property tax, and it seems like at least the majority of TAC felt that staying on course with incremental property levies is continues to be the right strategy for our community. So
Yeah, I think we had a good discussion. I think Westerville passed a school income tax. There's not too many around. Central Ohio that have them. Bexley has one. I think Pickerington. But more districts, as the pressure on property tax grows, are looking at alternative ways. A lot of those have failed, that have been tried. And so I think we're in a unique, good spot because we've done incremental property tax levies where many districts aren't able to do that. And we'll say that's why we have to carry a slightly higher cash balance than many of our peers in order to do that incremental phased-in approach, because we can't wait until we're totally out of money to ask for a small amount. And so I think our folks have come to appreciate that. And yes, the general consensus I felt was continue on that path unless something major were to change between now and 28.
Kelly, did you have a question?
I do have a couple questions. Okay, so this is August and we're doing the forecast. Usually it's in November. So is there information that we're missing, like challenges that you and your team encounter because now it's August as opposed to mid-November?
Yeah, so there's more assumptions in here. So we brought this up when the state changed this, a forecast from a practitioner standpoint in August. We haven't even ran the first payroll of the school year. So I'm still a little estimate on salaries and enrollment and insurance. We haven't got our property tax settlement for the second half of 26, so I'm still using February's numbers there, and that's a big piece of our revenue. So the two biggest pieces of information that we rely on in this thing aren't available yet. So it really doesn't make sense to do an August forecast. ODE understands that. I think they may try and push it to September. But again, for those county budget commissions that want to reduce property taxes on their own, they want this information now.
They have to make a decision by a certain time of the year.
Yeah, so they would need to have a hearing, if this is a piece of that hearing, and then they would need to determine, okay, are we gonna roll back rates between now and when we send out the bills in January? And so there's a lot, bills go out in January, so you back up a couple months in order to start that process to figure everything out. So they want this piece of information now, so they can do that. But it doesn't make any sense.
Yes. I just want to point out again, I appreciate it I'm trying to find a slide where you compare. For the messaging that we're hearing is we're giving so much funding to education and education as a blanket and not really realizing that the funding isn't actually coming here to public education. And so I appreciate that comparison because I think visually people need to know and understand what is actually being done as opposed to the messaging that's being provided. provided. So thank you for including that chart. I had a question about the service and supplies and others, but you gave a good explanation as to that breakdown and what those expenses entail. I want you to touch on that unreserved balance. So, each forecast, that number seems to stay the same. And in the forecast, it talks about paying it down. But then when we come back around, it's still the same larger number. And can you just explain a little bit as to why? Because I know people have questions about that. I'm still trying to grasp not the concept, but just to understand the details about it. So if you just could elaborate on that just a little bit.
Yeah, I think so. If you think about it this way, our expenses are growing about 2.25 mils, right? And so from 22 to 26, when we, before 22, if you look at the forecast, we can't assume future levy, so I would have shown that balance going down. Then we pass an incremental levy, so that 2.9222 is set because if you take 4 years, that equates to about 2.25 mils a year, and that's what we need on the expense side. So, we do everything we can to try to hold down expenses, and so if we end up slightly under, then that balance will stay. What we're able to do here, next year revenue is going to be flat, and so our expenses are going to go up. That balance is going to get eaten away pretty quickly moving forward because that incremental levy, we really have no growth in revenue in the future, right? So it will get eaten up, and it will start to get eaten up quickly. And I know that didn't happen over the last 4 years again because we got growth in revenue. The small amount of growth that we get from inside mills when we do reappraisal, even that was limited through the House bill, so that it caps it at inflation. So even the small 4.5 mils that we were allowed to get growth on now doesn't grow. We're very different than like a municipality with an income tax. Those grow with inflation, and that's a big pro of why we would try to do an income tax. And I think the appeal of schools is to do an income tax because then you don't have to go back to the ballot as often because that's going to grow. The problem, I think, is that we created schools a long time ago that are heavily reliant on property tax, and if you start to mix the two, I think that gets confusing because only a portion of your revenue is going to grow. You're still going to have to come back for the rest. So yeah, I mean the unreserved balance. You look at a levy both for what is on here is the surplus deficit or the run rate. You want to get ahead of that run rate before it gets too big, even if you have the cash balance to stay off the ballot. So I think in order to do these incrementals, we have to carry a slightly higher cash balance, and that's where we're at. But I assure you it will start to go down in the next couple of years.
So is the difference, this is a really basic summarize, is that past years we've had revenue continue to increase over the years, and you're saying, or your forecast, it's going to just stay flat. We're just not going to increase our revenue.
Correct. I mean, if the state comes through and the next biennium gives us a little bit, that would be a positive variance to this, but I don't think it's going to be to the tune of $9 million.
My last question for this, I think it's this slide. So you have these, if we're keeping on the same incremental pattern, which I heard in TAC, the same things that Nikki mentioned. Is there a number attached to this, like a 2.2?
This is what we've historically done, 2.9.
Okay. That was all I just wanted to say. I think I just wanted to say 2.9222 also. But I like it. Thank you, TJ.
No, I don't. We asked them the other day in finance, but I think my big takeaway from finance committee is just that there's a lot of levers to pull in the next 2 to 3 to 4 years around levy decisions and phase 3 and evaluating what other districts are doing around property tax versus income tax. I mean, sales tax is out there too, but that's more aggressive. So, and so I think we're just going to be talking about this probably a lot. So, yeah.
definitely. I agree, and I think that we're gonna have a strategy where we prepare to pivot just based on, what we continue to see happen over the next, several years. But I'm happy to see that TJ's keeping a good eye out on what other districts are doing and how they're getting creative and what that could mean, or, what that impact looks like. So very future forward in terms of thinking and planning. So thank you.
Okay, last question. So August, and you talked about the things that are missing and the things that you don't know yet. So are you allowed to, like, internally, can we have a November, like, once you have those numbers, are you gonna include that in your financial reports that you give us?
So we'll update our base target, we'll agree to this forecast, so then as we go through the year, the way I line it up is as we go through the year, if that monthly financial report shows variances, then you would see that show up in the February forecast. I think, I talked to our payroll team today, I think I'm pretty close on that payroll number, I think we're good there.
I just had one question, and I think you were just going through the slides and I might have missed it. On slide 5, the state funding, and you talked about the one-time monies that are coming in. What was that for again?
So outside of the formula, the state gave a enrollment growth supplement. So they said if districts grow, it's over 3 years. If you grew, don't quote me on this, but it's something like 3% over that 3-year period. So we didn't get it last year, but when they measured it this year, our 400 half-day kindergartners became 800, right? The math, because they only count for a half a student. So now so we met the criteria this year. And so that's $2.6 million. It'll help offset the cost of that all-day kindergarten program, certainly.
But that's just a one-time.
One time.
Okay. Thank you. And thank you for all the work you do on this. I know the new requirements make this a little bit difficult.
Yeah, it's tough sitting in August trying to compete
Yeah.
with your treasurer advisor, that's for sure.
But thank you for keeping us in compliance and making sure we're keeping up with state mandates. So, okay. Well, moving along, superintendent's report, Dr. Bowers.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, TJ. So our mission at Worthington Schools is to empower a community of learners who will change the world. We do that through our 4 vision statements. So our first is that we will engage each student with diverse opportunities to maximize every student's potential. Last week, we welcomed our K-12 students back to school and really had an outstanding beginning to the 26-27 school year. This week, we welcome our Sutter Park preschool students to school with a phased-in approach. So all students pre-K-12 will be in school by middle of next week, August 27th. And we expect to have roughly 10,700 students present in Worthington schools. Our second vision statements will provide a safe environment where every student can grow intellectually, emotionally, socially, and physically. This coming Friday is our Cards and Wolves football game, where our teams will compete at Worthington Kilbourne High School. This is a special evening because between our football teams, marching bands, and cheerleaders, we'll have roughly 600 Worthington High School students participating in the same co-curricular event. Add in our student sections, and we'll easily have over 1,500 students present for the evening. We'd love to have our whole family in one place, but we would ask fans to come early, be patient, and help to create a safe experience for everyone on Friday. Our third vision statements will provide consistent communication and promote dialogue with our community. Last week at our annual staff convocation, we worked to define what Be Kind to Kids means in Worthington schools. We believe it's holding students to high expectations, believing in their growth, and sharing that belief in a way that our students will respond to. In Worthington, we desire to hold ourselves and our students to high standards while treating each person with dignity and respect. Several Worthington teachers were highlighted, and Dave Murphy, Lori Barr, and Carmen Metzger. We just encourage our community to learn more about those staff members and see more from that convocation on our Worthington Schools YouTube page. So it's all available on YouTube. And then fourth, we'll be responsible and transparent with our community's resources. As everyone in Central Ohio, most of Ohio knows, it's been an incredibly wet August. And while Worthington has certainly been more fortunate than many surrounding communities, in a normal year, our landscape team would spend much less time mowing grass than we need to right now. So that takes resources from other landscape responsibilities, and as community members begin to use our elementary fields for WYB events, they may expect longer than normal grass for August. Our teams do the best they can in these conditions, and we would just ask for a level of patience. President Evelyn Skinner, that is our report.
Thank you for that. I will add for Friday night, Motown Showdown, it's also Grandparents' Night at Worthington Kilbourne. So yes, get in the traffic line early because it's going to be very, very busy. But an exciting evening. Any questions for Dr. Bowers? No? All right, Treasurer's report.
I don't want to bore you with any more information than I already have tonight, but I do want to just mention that we're in the same boat with everybody on insurance. Most public was in the news again today for similar reasons, although maybe caused differently. But we're all facing tough increases. We are as well as a district, and so I'm waiting on a couple bits of information, and I think I'm hoping to be able to get us to where we need to be. We'll share that at tonight's board meeting.
Any questions for TJ? Board committee reports and announcements.
And am I going first since I already shared that I attended TAC last week and shared the primary update that I wanted to. Just pull my notes really quickly and make sure there was nothing else, although Kelly was there as well, so Kelly may have other things that she wanted to highlight. Yeah, I mean, some of the things that TJ highlighted to the Treasurer Advisory Committee was also things that he highlighted this evening, highest enrollment ever, and a lower income, the lower portion from the state is what we've seen. And then, TJ also highlighted that there are other communities that are exploring earned income tax only. I think that when we get into, or if we get into an income tax conversation, distinguishing between earned income and what is actually taxed versus what is not, especially with older members of our community, will be very important. That's all. Thank you. And obviously, we all attended convocation, and thank you to Trent and the team and everyone who was part of putting convocation on. It is always a fantastic way to start the year, highlighting the talents of our teachers and staff. Always a positive message from Dr. Bowers, and just a lot of great energy going into the school year. So thank you.
Repeat. I also went to TAC. So it was actually my first TAC meeting. So 5th year on the board, never participated in TAC before. So that was just a neat experience to see community members coming out on the first day of school. That's when the meeting was scheduled for. But the room, to me, I felt like it was full. I mean, no scheduling, I think. You sent it out anyways, but. So I appreciate that people take the time to provide their expert feedback or their expertise about what they know. We talked a little bit about the next facilities plan. TJ briefly went over that as well and got a little bit of feedback about people's thoughts about where we're headed. And the recommendation was for a TAC member to participate, from that group as well. TJ, do other districts have a treasurer advisory committee?
Yeah, I think it varies. Some are, they call it the finance committee. We have a finance committee that a couple board members sit on, then treasurer advisory committee that community members sit on, and Dublin has the same sort of situation as we do. Columbus has a more involved process that's an official board committee. But yeah, I think we have some great people on have some of the best people on our staff, so I'll say that.
Yeah, I found it fascinating, so I appreciate the time that they take and the time that you take to prepare for that meeting. Convocation was great. The music teachers did a phenomenal job. We all sang along, and so that was really good. So thank you again for everyone that put that on.
Stephanie? I had finance committee, which we've already covered, and also convocation. So I think that about covers it. I will say that we have gotten to see the updated auditorium at Worthington Kilbourne. That was the first time that I had seen Thomas's, and it is lovely. So it was exciting to be in that space for the first time.
My update is the same. I attended the finance committee as well as the, actually, I guess I missed the insurance committee. I was a hair behind, but I did get the update and all the information from TJ and the gang. And I'm looking forward to really helping to strategize a plan around how to keep, I mean, just like TJ mentioned, we're not at a place to stay cost neutral anymore, neither is any organization. And I can say even professionally, in my 9 to 5, we're seeing the same thing. And it'll just be about, applying some creative solutions and strategy to help, minimize cost as much as we can, or at least manage it and as best as we can. Convocation was great, just like everybody else mentioned. Not only was it amazing to see our educators being recognized and celebrated and welcomed on the first day, but the messaging was really good, and I believe it's going to help grow our educators and really set them up for the year. So please do go on and watch. Thank you.
Yeah, I will echo convocation is just always one of my most favorite events of the year. This year did not disappoint. Being in the new space and the new auditorium was fantastic. Trent's message was fantastic. I'm always amazed at how, as a public speaker, you're able to have everything in your head and do that twice and not lose your train of thought. I know you lost your train of thought for just a minute, and I thought maybe I was going to see you. But no, you picked it right back up. So that is incredibly impressive to me. And the message was very strong, and I loved all the nostalgia. Being a 90s kid, the Saved by the Bell reference, and there were a lot of throwbacks, and the music teachers just were the stars of the show. They were awesome. I also attended it was the first staff meeting, right, where they unveiled the new, they commissioned an artist for Thomas, and she did this beautiful rendering of the new building in watercolor, and you all have, I think, a print of it, but the larger one is really incredible to see. So that was a really good event, and all of the staff in the room got a copy of that print, as well as Kilbourne got a copy too of the new building. So just, small little tokens, I think, to start off a new school year in the new buildings and the new spaces just was a fantastic touch from the administration. I just really appreciate that, and I know the staff did too. First day of school pictures, I love just sitting on social media and seeing all those come in, all of our community members who tag us. And just the excitement of the first day of school. It's such a wonderful time of year. And then the first home game Friday night was just so much fun, and just great to have the community all packed in stadiums again and to have football back. So that's my update. I didn't have any committee meetings, just a few appearances at public events. But so moving along to the consent agenda, E1, Dr. Bowers.
Yes, thank you. I'd like to recommend that the Board of Education approve the consent agenda. That's items F1 through H3. You'll see under section F, just appropriation modifications to match the forecast. You'll see under consent agenda, item G, our personnel items. You will see one certified retirement for the end of the year. So Jamie Vile wanted to be first, so she shouldn't be with us all this year. And then under consent agenda, under operations, and section H, you will see acceptance of donations, continued with our impractical busing resolutions, as a couple new students have enrolled to those private schools, so we have to repass these resolutions. And then one senior remaining in the district. So that is items F1 through H3, please.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Oh, I just want to point out the donations. I always look at it because I'm always interested, and I'm just seeing Dairy Queen, and I just appreciate Ryan over at Dairy Queen in Worthington, how much that he does and for our schools, and it was really sweet. That's all.
Great. We have no other discussion? Okay, Mr. Keesling, would you please call the roll?
Mrs. Davis.
Yes.
Mrs. Epling Skinner.
Yes.
Ms. Harless.
Yes.
Mrs. Hudson.
Yes.
Mrs. Costa Flowers.
Yes.
Motion carries. That brings us to, I believe it's actions recommended by the treasurer and new business.
Thank you. I'd like to recommend that the Board of Education approve the minutes from the August 10th meeting as presented in Closure I-1.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Mr. Keesling, would you please call the roll?
Mrs. Epling Skinner.
Yes.
Ms. Harless.
Yes.
Mrs. Hudson.
I'll abstain since I was not there.
Mrs. Costa Flowers.
Yes.
Mrs. Davis.
Yes.
Motion carries. Items I2, approval of the financial forecast, which we just heard a few minutes ago.
Thank you. I'd like to recommend that the board approve the financial forecast as presented in Enclosure I-2, please.
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, Mr. Keesling, would you please call the roll?
Ms. Harless.
Yes.
Mrs. Hudson.
Yes.
Mrs. Costa Flowers.
Yes.
Mrs. Davis.
Yes.
Mrs. Epling Skinner.
Yes. Motion carries. J1, actions recommended by the superintendent, new business.
Yes, thank you. I'd like to recommend that the Board of Education approve item J1, which is a resolution amending the Worthington Kilbourne High School construction documents for baseball and softball. Just as a point of context, you did approve these funds back in the winter as we worked to build equity around baseball and softball in Worthington Kilbourne High School. This resolution just ties that approval to the construction documents. It does not change the cost that you've already approved. So item J1, please.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion, any questions? Hearing none, Mr. Keesling, would you please call the roll?
Mrs. Hudson.
Yes.
Mrs. Costa Flowers.
Yes.
Mrs. Davis.
Yes.
Mrs. Epling Skinner.
Yes.
Ms. Harless.
Yes.
Motion carries. That brings us to K on the agenda, which is requests, questions, concerns from the board.
Yes, so I was going to follow up with Ms. Stewart from Worthington about a time to meet. She was actually out last week, council's on break. So she just got back to me today, she will get us some dates. But the question that she came back to me with was, should we consider a Monday or other day of the week? So before I answer her, I will throw that out to you all, if there is a preference.
I'm open.
Okay.
Whatever is most convenient for everyone.
No preference.
I think I will likely say, she thinks council will prefer Monday, and there's usually one Monday where we don't, none of us meet, so maybe we'll look at that and then I'll come back next meeting.
That works.
Okay.
Thank you.
I had shared with you all a list of possible presentations that we could have for the rest of the year that Dr. Bowers had put together to kind of give you a little bit of time to think about them before we got here to this moment. So did anyone have any thoughts on those proposals, any amendments, any?
Good.
I thought that was great too.
I did too.
Yeah.
Okay, sounds good. So I think we'll just go with those.
Yeah, so we'll work through this, but as you know, you don't see anything on here for January yet. So as you're thinking of things, as there are items that come up, feel free to shoot us an email and then we can begin to build that schedule for the second half of the year as well.
I actually like not planning that far out anyway, so it's really, things come up.
I'll just share this this could go either now or in the calendar as well, but you guys may have seen that the Worthington Education Foundation is, actually I should have shared during my update that I attended their retreat, so I did, which was a good productive retreat. But they are having a Pizza for the Cause at Worthington Hills this Thursday. It is from 6 to 8.
Is it Thursday or Tuesday?
Sorry. Oh, it's Wednesday, it's not either.
Okay, I was
There we go.
It's
I'm
the
glad you
same-
questioned me.
Well, it's the same night as Meet the Teacher at Kilbourne.
Oh, you're like, I know I have a conflict.
Yeah, so I'm like, I know it's not Thursday,
It
it's
is
Thursday.
Wednesday, the 26th, from 6 to 8, and again at the Hills Market on only 2 Jupiter Road. So if you're able to stop by, please do.
And that might be nice to have, because we do just now have a new executive director for the WEF. So it might be nice for the next, beginning of January on to have like a WEF update, which, give her some time to.
They have some new board members and.
Right.
Yeah, right.
So we haven't heard from that organization in a while. One of the things we've talked about too, and this could be, like, I think the schedule looks fantastic for this year, but looking ahead at next year, we've talked about maybe food services and talking about, because we have new offerings in the cafeterias, in the high schools now with the new buildings, and maybe it would just be nice to hear from that group about some of the things that they're doing. But I think this is really strong. I'm excited to hear from some of the new administrators and get some updates from them in the next few months. So, okay. So any other announcements or requests, questions, concerns from the board? No. Okay, that brings us to calendar. So our next board meeting will be September 14th, 6:30 here at the WEF. We'll talk about House Bill 96 and attendance changes and Stay in the Game partnership. September 28th, we'll be back to talk about student achievement results for 25-26. And then October 12th, we'll just have a regular board meeting here at the WEC at 6:30. So that brings us to item M1, which is entering into executive session. This is a recommended motion to enter into executive session to discuss the employment, dismissal, discipline, promotion, demotion, or compensation of an employee. Can I get a motion?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Mr. Keating, would you please call the roll?
Mrs. Costa Flowers,
Yes.
Mrs. Davis,
Yes.
Mrs. Epling Skinner,
Yes.
Ms. Harless,
Yes.
Mrs. Hudson.
Yes.
Motion carries. We are now in executive session. Thank you.